had a little bit of a delay, but we are ready to begin. All right, so let me just, for those who have been able to connect, my name is Roger Corby. I work alongside Brent Hernandez. We deal with our exports department within the organization throughout the Caribbean and, of course, in Trinidad and Tobago. And what we will be doing today is presenting information to everyone on POL SORB, which is one of the products that we offer at the company. Um, excuse me, Steve Snyder will be the one doing the presentation, and he'll also be available to answer any specific questions you may want to ask about the product, maybe directly related to your operations. And so what we're going to do is Steve is going to have the presentation. They will have some videos which will show the product in action. And hopefully at the end, you have a very good understanding of exactly what this product does, how it can work for you, what the benefits are, what kind of savings you can get by utilizing this product as opposed to other absorbents that are also out there. And if you are interested, just let us know and we can provide you guys with the quotations. Or if you have previously purchased in the past and wanted to get a better understanding of exactly how this is working for you, this is also an opportunity for that. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the presentation on to Mr. Snyder, and he will present to everybody the POL SORB product and one or two other items that you can utilize for your operations. Okay, Steve, you can proceed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Corby. We'll start our presentation then. What we've got is just a series of slides that will give you basically an overall view of what we do. We appreciate the invitation from IRP to come here and talk to you about this. What we always try to look for in a company that we want to partner up with is somebody who has an environmental conscience and really wants to provide services and products to individuals to help keep our planet as clean as possible. And we certainly found that in IRP, and we're grateful for all the efforts they've done in helping us. Next. We truly appreciate too Mr. Corby and all his company and how they've worked with us over the years. We've been dealing with them for quite some time. Just a little bit of information about myself and our company. We're a family-owned company. We basically have been able to establish ourselves not just as a seller of products, but as a manufacturer of products. And so I've been able to not just learn about the product and help other companies put it in, but we also make our own machines for manufacturing. So we're very familiar with the product in all its different phases. We get the raw product, and then we've built machines to also make socks, pads, booms, different components of loose product so that we can basically give you anything that you might need. We feel that that's a tremendous advantage because if you need something, then we encourage you to just tell us. And we have the capability of making then perhaps what you need versus just what is available, as so many other companies try to give you just what they have. We try to tailor things to be what you need. And we're always researching skins and different ways in which we can improve our product. I'm also the one that they send out. So I've been all over the world demonstrating the product. We used to be partners with a gentleman. He said, "Oh, you don't want to go someplace and perhaps be responsible for a failure." And I basically have always resisted that. If there's something that's not right, we want to be aware of it so we can make it right. We always try to find solutions. And so I've been out doing all kinds of applications, trying to learn everything we can about this product. And what we find is the greatest resources is companies such as yourself. You're the one that uses it. You know the most. Just for instance on that, we were dealing with a fire department, and they told us while we were using it that they like to throw the product onto their parts and onto their engines because it picks up the oil so good. They were able just to use it to absorb whatever oils was on their parts or their engines, and then they just swept it off. And it was just another use and that we could share with other companies that got rid of chemicals and got rid of particular problems so that we could always continue to make the best product and the best type of applications for it. Next, please. The reason that we've looked at this not just as a job, but it's kind of a cause. You live in one of the prettiest spots in the world, and we certainly live in farmland, and our world is precious. It's something, though, that has to be taken care of. And so we feel that we have this duty to help future generations. Yes, it's true. We sell the product and it's our business, but we feel it's also our calling. So it's not just something that we feel we can do in order to make a profit. It's something that we enjoy doing because it does have a benefit, not just for us, but future generations. And that's what we always have strived to do. We can help the environment one spill at a time. Next. Well, we had a quick view of what we view. We want to help you to keep it in that way, but we're mostly, yeah, that's the view. We also understand that this presents kind of a difficult situation. You live in an area that has a limited amount of space, and everything that you do on the land ends up in the water eventually. So what we try to do are have products that basically can maximize what we do and protect the environment around it. Next. So we're talking mainly about oil spill cleanup, and in the next slide we'll show all the different ways in which that ends up coming. We have oil spills on water, land, and we also have it in the soil. Very few products, if any, other than ours, can take care of all three. So some products are limited in their scope. Our product has a way, the POL SORB has a way of taking care of all three, and we'll discuss that as we go on. So next. We know that there's never one particular product that's the best for every situation, but which one provides you the best. So what we try to look at is there something that can take care of all the different problems and still be available, sustainable? Will it do further damage to the environment? And how does it protect our wildlife? And as you can see, the slide tells you that 1 gallon of oil can contaminate over 1 million gallons of water. And certainly we are interested in our oceans, but our fresh water is probably one of the most precious resources that we have, and oftentimes it's not cared for. And so we want to make sure that we have a product that is sustainable, will take care of the environment, and also take care of wildlife. And that's what our product has been tailored to do. And the way in which we do that, we feel provides the greatest advantage for any company. Next. So where are the different spills coming from? Well, we know that there's a wide variety of companies that can benefit from it. Fire departments, industry, even consumers. So we have all these different ways. We have car accidents, industrial spills, industrial waste, consumer waste, hazmat situations. All these things can benefit from having a product that is easily used and user-friendly, but also environmentally friendly. And that's what this product continues to display for us. Next. So one of the areas that is often not talked about, and this is actually from a spill in Trinidad in the past, is contaminated soils, whether that's from above ground surfaces or underground storage tanks. These can leak oil, and once they get into the soil, and they not only damage the soil that's around it, but I also begin to travel, and they can get into our water sources. So these basically need some sort of remediation. Our product can be mixed in with the oil, and whether it's on the surface or it's down underneath, what it begins to do is act like a sponge. So instead of some particular absorbents pushing the material deeper into the soil, this actually begins to wick or draw the oil up. And what that allows us to do is to mitigate the problem, but also kind of rectify the situation in the fact that we're not pushing the spill down, but we're drawing it up. We're actually cleaning it. What this allows us to do as we clean up the soil, natural microbes and bacteria come back into the soil, and we actually enhance a particular environmental solution called natural attenuation. The natural attenuation allows for what naturally is in soil to remediate itself. And so by collecting or gathering the oil up inside of itself, we begin to create a good environment so that this can take care of itself, it can remediate itself. Also, we bring that oil up to the surface where water and sunlight and other important environmental factors begin to break it down. And then the peat moss itself has something called folic acid that's natural in plants, but also more so in peat moss. And so that begins to break down oil, weaken its chemical change. And those chemical chains then start to allow it to become carbon dioxide in water. And so it begins to naturally break down the oils so that we can not just contain a spill, but also remediate the spill and get rid of it. Next. We have a lot of different everyday problems though. We have perhaps you have a car that leaks oil. That's something that's quite prevalent. But we also have larger spills from trucking, also from any kind of storage facilities. We also have individuals in companies that oftentimes are not perhaps as environmentally conscious as they should be, and so they maybe produce a waste stream that needs a certain regulation. What we hope to do is provide, though, a solution so that instead of having to be told that we need to do something, we can see that there's an inexpensive alternative to just releasing such a waste stream or having to dispose of it in some sort of landfill, but we can take care of that. So all these different problems really help us to appreciate why we need an absorbent, but where some people ask us is why do we call ours a peat moss product, POL? It came from some of the government people that we dealt with here in the United States, and they like an acronym. So it stands for petroleum, oils, and lubricants. And that's the different classifications of spills. And so when we talked about a POL spill, they were able to easily recognize what kind of product we had and what it could help them take care of. Next. So we want to compare it to some of the absorbents that will be or see commonly used today. And if we could, next. We probably have seen a lot of these products: clay, polypropylene, corn cob, and cellulose. Two of them are kind of more natural products. Clay has some particular disadvantages that we talk about. The polypropylene is, if we talk about clay, it takes a lot of the product to pick up 1 gallon of spill, almost 14 pounds. It also adds a tremendous amount of volume to your spill. So you're not going to deal with just a small amount of spill that you have, but you're going to be adding to it. So you're going to dispose of more actual absorbent than you are oil. It also is hard. It has a hardness factor of 6, which is greater than steel, so it will damage equipment that is around it. It also has a known carcinogen, silica. We have seen it used a lot in like kitty litter, but it's also the largest killer of cats because they breathe in the silica, and that causes asbestosis or mesothelioma. And we see that in cats, and so it can do the same thing to individuals. Because it's really not something that ever breaks down, the disposal is expensive. It doesn't float on water. It doesn't push water away. It also absorbs the water. And so it's not hydrophobic. And if water does come into contact with it, it will take the fluid right off the surface since it doesn't really absorb, and it will leach it back into the environment. And you've got to keep such a large amount on hand. And it just is really not a beneficial absorbent, and so it's been banned in many landfills. Next. Polypropylene is probably one of the next. And if we really look at polypropylene, it's just shards of plastic. And so it can, again, leach fluid back into the environment, not as bad as clay. But if it's put under pressure, a lot of times it's used to collect and then retain some of the oil, and so that's not always something that you want in a absorbent material. It also does produce, because of its plastic, a static charge, so it can be very dangerous. It does not suppress explosive vapors, and again, it adds to the volume of the spill, and so its disposal can be very expensive. But it's easily used today. It's also dangerous to other wildlife if they eat or come into contact with the polypropylene. It's abrasive to their skin and can destroy their digestive tracts. And so while it may be used a great deal out on the water, it also is susceptible to wave action and the salt water breaking down and continuing to contaminate the environment. Next. Corn cob and cellulose is more of a natural product. But it also is not a very efficient product. It requires a tremendous amount to pick up, say, a gallon of spill. It requires 6 pounds to clean up just 1 gallon. It also, when put under pressure or when exposed to another fluid such as water, will leach back into the environment. It expands or absorbs and explodes kind of as it picks up a liquid. It creates more waste. It does not suppress vapors. And again, because it has a high disadvantage in leaching fluid back into the environment, its disposal is very expensive because it requires so much of it to really pass the paint and filters liquid test. Next. Why do we say that peat moss is such a good absorbent? Well, over the years, and we've been doing this for over 25 years, we've found that this ratio stays very true. 1 pound picks up a gallon of oil. It's non-abrasive, so it has a hardness factor less than 1. So it's very easy on equipment. In fact, in the early days of jet engines, they used to use it, and they would throw this up into the jet to kind of measure air currents going through the engine, and so it has little or no effect on equipment. So in certain instances, like at an airport, it is known then not to do any damage to the airplanes. It's also a sustainable organic material that has a renewable source. So a peat bog, once it starts being harvested, can be left alone, and it will once again grow itself back where we can continue to use it. It's hydrophobic. Once we have dried the material down to a certain percentage that we hold as proprietary, then it becomes hydrophobic, which it means it won't absorb water. So you're able to target your spill. You're only going to pick up what you want to. And that's key if we're trying to talk about waste minimization. It's also very easy to burn. It adds a kcal value of around, I think, 2,300, but it also has a BTU value of around 17,000. And you probably know that in Ireland, they actually burn peat moss as a fuel source in certain homes. It does because it actually absorbs the material into its cellular structure and collapses around it. It is able to suppress volatile vapors up to 90%. We've actually poured gasoline on it and held a flame over it. And you see sometimes a little poof, but not the explosive situation. And it's easily then taken care of, or it's easier to deal with. saves money, time, and labor, and we'll talk about a couple more things as we go on, but basically, once you put this on there, you'll see that it shrinks. It only adds about 20% to the volume of the spill, and because it shrinks, it's because it's collapsing around it, sealing it off. It's easier for you to see then where it needs to be put on because it turns dark in color as it absorbs. You'll be able to see if there's an area that needs more product. You're able to then kind of target where you want it to go so that you can take care of your spill in a very efficient way. Because it's lightweight, it's easily to get the product to where you want it to go, to carry bags and stuff. You get more bang for your buck. A 40-pound bag of clay only picks up about 3 gallons, whereas a 16-pound bag of ours picks up over 16 gallons. So it's much easier on your workforce in order to care for a spill. And because then you're not adding a lot to its disposal, you're able to remediate faster, but also produce less waste. Next. It can be used on all kinds of hydrocarbons. We try to be very careful about just saying it's a petroleum because there are so many other types of materials that are petroleum based, but we like to refer to them as hydrocarbons. So inks, paints, pesticides, anything that's based on a hydrocarbon, it will pick up. It does meet our United States EPA, OSHA, and ANSI guidelines for material performance. So it can be used when used with simple waste oils. It can be disposed of in a landfill. We like that because then it doesn't just add the spill now to the landfill, it actually remediates it. So all you're really disposing of is not the oil, but the absorbent material, because the oil will continue to break down and be released as CO2 and water. It does reduce volume when compared to clay by up to 80%. So because it shrinks around the product and encapsulates it, we're only adding 20% to the volume of spill, whereas clay is its total value. So it's much more efficient. We call that waste minimization. So if you're talking about limited landfill space that you want to take this to, this is going to give you the most product. We'll talk about that in just a few more minutes. And it can really absorb quickly. That's one of the things that surprises a lot of people. You don't have to stand around for hours and hours waiting to see the results. You'll see the results immediately. And even with our socks and boots, you'll see that quick pickup. So you're going to be able to really work your spill much more efficiently and fast. Next. This gives us a kind of a comparison for just a 55-gallon spill. If we were to use clay, and I think some of our figures are older now, clay has gotten more expensive, and for a situation like yours where maybe the clay is shipped in, it could be even greater expense. But it requires about 770 pounds of clay to pick up that 55-gallon spill. You had one spill, now you are one barrel for the spill. Once you get done, you're going to have 5 barrels that you have to dispose of, and oftentimes that's very expensive. It's usually around $500 per barrel. So your total cost for the clay was around $2,577 just to pick up that 1 barrel. Whereas with the peat moss, you're going to use a 55 pounds of peat. So at a cost, and you'd have to talk to Roger, that's the cost that we may have in the States, but I don't know what their costs are. Even at 55 pounds, though, is maybe just a little greater than the clay, but you're going to see that you only added 20% to the volume of the spill, so you have slightly more than the drum. If you can find an incinerator or somebody that can use the fuel source, such as oftentimes cement kilns or whatever, they can actually burn this particular product. You can then dispose of it much cheaper. You're looking at about $210 versus $2,500. But the less amount of time, having to deal with 4 less barrels or 3.8 less barrels of material, the time that it takes to pick it up, the labor involved, the savings is actually a great deal more. Next. And that really shows, we want to talk about also the ability of it to clean up. With so many other materials, you're going to see that the product doesn't actually absorb the material. It kind of sticks to the surface of it. So because of that, anytime you rub up against it or you hold it in your hand, you're going to get contamination off. So that's why when in contact with birds or out on the ocean or a waterway, we're so very careful of the animals that are going to come into contact with it. What we're able to really display with the two different sets of pictures is the fact that your oil spill is going to contaminate fish. It's going to contaminate birds, whatever sea creatures. But if it's encapsulated, then they're going to be able to just shake that off. If you actually shook in the last picture that feather, most of the material would come off, and if you dipped it in clean water, it would totally come off. And so you're going to see that not only with animals, but in your floors, any kind of application that we can talk about, you're going to see the complete remediation of the particular product. Next. And this is our variety of materials that we supply. And of course, our model is well known here. But we can truly appreciate that we need to develop materials and things so that you guys can use them the most efficiently and effectively. And so we have a wide variety of socks, pads, and booms. We've also custom made things for out in the ocean, where we'll actually put heavy duty ropes, clips, rings, so that they can be linked and joined together. We have a couple of dams here in our state of Missouri that use this to clean the waterway from the turbine generators that they have, so that the product is not released out onto the river. And they're able to use several of our booms. When they originally started, they used a big boom, but they found out they absorbed so much material that it was hard to recover. So they've been able to go to smaller booms because they're so effective and so efficient, and that allows them then to easily recover the material and easily take care of their problems. So oftentimes you'll find that you don't need as much or as big a material to take care of a lot of your problems. And we have the different drums, and I know IRP supplies a lot of the materials that you would use to make up your own kits if you needed to too. Next. And we know that this is a partnership. So we always look to the companies. Like I would say, we try to make ourselves available. I've gone all around the world, and I always look for advantages to work. I've told companies I'm a diver. I'll go underneath the water. I'll go on the surface. I've actually helped remediate soil for the government. Anything I can do and anything we can do as a company to help other companies such as yours to take care of their particular problems and spills. We feel it's not just the fact that we want to sell you the product. We're willing to meet you face to face and be able to discuss whatever issues or problems you're having so that we can find the solutions to the different problems. And that's why we like IRP there, the same mind. Whatever we can do to help you find the solutions to all your problems is what we want to do. We have other products that we can make available to take care of aqueous-based materials, water-based chemicals that can do the same thing as efficiently and easily. Next. So in lieu of questions, though, I think we're going to try to move along to one of our videos, and then we'll ask a question afterward. So we're going to show you a couple of very quick videos. First, one that allows you to see how you can pick up a spill on water. That's probably the most difficult of the situations. And sometimes people think, well, you know, you can do this because you have, you create the right environment. We've been able to do this with a lot of different kids. So what we use is transmission fluid. We just use it because it's red and easy to see. This works with any kind of petroleum oil. What you'll notice around the edge of the peat moss, you'll see it turning dark in nature. That's because it's starting to absorb or pick up the material. So it tells me exactly what we need to use and where we need to use more. So we're going to put just a little bit more on it and spread it out over the surface of the spill. If you see unspent material, which is not completely black, then we can just take this back off the surface and continue to use it. What you're now able to see, though, in a very quick time, this is all in real time, this is usually less than a minute, that our oil is now a pad of material, and therefore I can take and just pour the water out from around it. And you tell me if you see any red in that water. And yes, if you want to know, I do drink the water from time to time. It is that clean. So it's able to basically totally extract the oil from the water and leave us clean water. So this can be used out on a waterway. Peat moss is actually used in septic tanks around the United States to help take out any kind of bacteria such as E. coli. It is a purifying agent. And so because it's been able to pick up the oil, it's now just a cake of material that can be cleaned up at whatever time you want. And you can see that there's no red in the material. And that's why we try to say that we're just taking care of the environment one spill at a time. We're going to show you another one that is on surface. So a floor, and we're trying to get to that one. But again, it's the speed, but also the complete encapsulation that is important to see. Now, while this floor is painted, even on a natural concrete floor that hasn't been sealed, it will take and pull the spill up. And a lot of times all you need to do is just take a little water and spritz it on there and pull the material completely out. But you'll find that this floor is painted, but it really does show how easily it's picked up. So I think we've already had a spill. Oh, can you go back to the beginning? And again, this is in real time. So we have a spill on the floor. Sometimes we get a little over anxious and we put down too much. This shows you, though, that you can quickly pick up your spill. We're now just 20 seconds into this particular spill, and you'll notice that without waiting any more time, he's going to begin to sweep up this material. What they have encouraged a lot of mechanics around here to do is not to dispose of this, but to go ahead and put it in a drum. So you're able to see that the material has been picked up. If it's again spread out over it, if there's any residue, it will completely pick that up. So we do have a lot of mechanics that like this, but it also shows how that even on parts, some of the mechanics like to use it on parts because it's able to clean the oil off of parts and sometimes save them from using chemicals or sandblasting or any kind of other product. It now can be swept up, and they've been encouraged to put this in a drum that has spent material, but it continues to be used until it turns completely black. And when it's completely black, then that means that it's fully saturated. So it really just shows that the product is able to be used in a wide variety of configurations that we make. These are polypropylene skins so that they also are hydrophobic and they allow the water to go through and also the oil then to be absorbed. All of this is designed so that we can pick up spills quickly and easily and cost effectively. Also environmentally friendly. This is something that, as you probably remember, is used in gardens as a soil enhancement or soil augmentation. So this is not something that is harsh to the environment at all, but is probably the most environmentally friendly, cost-effective way in which you can take and clean up your spills. So if you have any questions, you can just put them in your chat and I will try to open that and answer them if you have any. And also you'll find that Roger and his company are very skilled in all the different ways in which this can, and then we give them any kind of support they need in order to, again, find the solutions you guys need. Well, hopefully that means I did a good job in the presentation, because a little bit more. How does it encapsulate the oil? Well, because the fact that peat moss is actually a hydrocarbon in waiting, so when put under pressure and over time, the peat moss will become shale and shale oil. So it has kind of, it's its own kin. So what we have been able to really research through, and we've done it with a couple of different universities here in the United States, once we take the water out of the particular peat moss, it becomes hydrophobic in nature. So for a while, the peat moss actually did like to take in water and release it then slowly to the soil, and that's why it's so good out into the environment. But once we've specially dried and augered the soil, and we do this very carefully so that we don't damage the structure of it, once it releases its water, all it wants is the oil. And so it pulls that into its cellular structure that once had the water in it, and then kind of collapses around that oil. So what we compare it to is like how that works so much faster. If you had a basketball size droplet of oil and you busted it up into a bunch of smaller droplets and then sucked that up into its cellular structure, you now have much more surface area for oxygen and other constituents to get in and work with the oil. And so it begins to break it down and remediate it. But peat moss also has something called folic acid in it. And that folic acid, you can look that up in Wikipedia, and it talks to you how great it is about breaking molecular chains or ionic bonds, and how then that begins to pull that oil apart and release it then as CO2 and water. So it's kind of like its own little manufacturing facility there. And because we dry it and auger it so carefully, we don't destroy that folic acid. And it really is, it's quite a remarkable thing, but it's kind of nature's way of taking care of a natural problem. But it mostly is because the peat moss is something that becomes shale and shale oil. So it's actually a hydrocarbon itself that's now a plant. And it's just waiting for time and pressure to turn it into a hydrocarbon. Hopefully that explains it. My wife tells me sometimes I get too nerdy and I get really too technical. Yes, we've actually done several in situs. We did one with the United States government. They wanted to do it just a little differently, but what you have to do, you can do it two different ways. You can actually remove the tank and then put this in there where the tank was. But so many of the times that means then if it rains or whatever, the water can get in there and try to push it away. The peat moss will begin to grab it. But that's one of this demonstration here. You'll notice that it actually sucked the oil up into its cellular structure. So it actually draws oil or wicks oil into itself. And so this can be put down into the soil. What the United States government did, they took out USTs and then they brought it to the surface and we treated it there on the surface. And I did the actual treatment for the government. It was down in Georgia, and we treated it on one day, and on the next day, there was a noticeable difference in the smell of the project. And so the government wanted to do kind of like the worst case scenario. And so what they did was they didn't touch it for like 4 months. And when we do the initial, we kind of stir the soil and we stir the peat moss in there and we stir it in with a nitrate. This was actually a 13-13-13 fertilizer. And that nitrate helped natural enzymes and microbes and bacteria come back into the soil, and they help to break down the different hydrocarbons too. But they used it with diesel and gas, and in 4 months they took that same soil and put it back in the holes that they took it out of. So they didn't have to transport it away. But again, you'll see this is sped up a little bit, but we do this demonstration all the time for different engineers, because it's just amazing how it does wick or pull it up in there, and you can actually see it turning dark. Again, that tells you where the saturation levels is, and it'll just continue to work until it pulls the oil completely off. We've been kind of amazed. It'll pull it almost completely out. If I left it in there, it would just continue to work. But it does work for UST removals. Sometimes even in that, if they do put a tank back in there, or they put any soil back in there, they'll put some peat back at the bottom to make sure if they anything that they missed, it pulls the peat pulls it up into itself. We've heard in certain soil instances that it's pulled it up as much as 10 meters. So it has a tremendous wicking action by creating kind of like a super sponge on the surface. And we've done both as far as this in situ. We've actually done in the ground and left it, and we've actually taken and pulled it out and treated it on the surface and then put it back. We actually did another one too. We've got a project that we did up in Washington State here in the United States, where they had a gas station that was leaking through its UST, and it was running to a lake. It was right next to a lake. And what we did was we created a barrier. So we lined a pit. They dug a pit about 3 inches wide and probably 100 feet long. And we filled that with our polypropylene skins. We made a special skin for it and kind of made a liner. And then we filled it full of peat moss. And they've told us that that's been in the ground now for about 7 years, and it's still working. It's still picking up any oil that's traveling toward the water and killing any kind of spread so that it doesn't get into the water. So we do all kinds of applications like that. Anything we can do to find a solution to a particular problem, that's what we're looking at. Because we know a lot of times oil will travel through different stratas of the ground. Those are great questions. Thank you for asking them. And we also encourage you, if you ever have any other kind of problem, please don't hesitate to ask. If we don't know, we'll ask somebody. Our idea is not to have some sort of ego like we know everything. We know that a lot of times it's you, the customer, that knows a lot more than we do. And so we need to be talking to you and getting input from you as to the best way in which this can be used. And if you need anything, we have a complete arsenal of different test cases, videos, anything you might need. And in this kind of setting, just contact Roger. We'll be happy to come back and do training for you people. I know with a pandemic, its travel is really hard right now, but I think it's also shown us a way in which we can use technology to continue to do education. And so we're happy to talk to any of your people and give them education on how to use it. You know, a lot of times we'll hear the big complaint about the product is it is lightweight, so it's prone to the wind. We've come up with different kind of techniques to try and counteract that. A lot of it is just education. So, you know, if you take and create wind barriers and then put the product behind it, you can negate the wind, but you can see how fast it also picks up. So, you know, it does basically, once it hits the product, it just sticks right to it. So, you know, that's one of the things that we're constantly working on, is how to make the product better, but also the better ways in which it can be used.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody who participated, and I want to thank Steve for a great presentation. It was very, very informative. Um, our company, IRP Fire and Safety Limited, will always remain available to be able to assist you and answer any questions that you individually will have. The sales reps who work for us, who come to your particular locations, will always be available. And feel free to check in with us whenever you have any kind of inquiry. If it's not something that we can answer directly, we have the backup of the people from who manufacture the POL SORB, so that if you have any particular request in terms of the best way to apply the product, given where you want to use it, we will be more than happy to be able to assist and make sure it can be done in the best way possible. So once again, I would like to say thank you again to Steve for giving us such an excellent presentation, and we'll be in touch. Before
Okay,
we
guys,
head out,
thanks a lot.
okay, I just wanted to make sure if anybody had any specific questions that they wanted to ask just before we head out. All right, well, I guess we've definitely covered it, but if something pops into your mind afterward, feel free to get in contact with a rep, or you can get in contact with myself directly, and we'll answer the question for you, and we'll move forward that way. Okay, thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, then.